Welcome, listeners, to another factual account from the irradiated ruins of post-nuclear America, where humanity's greatest scientific achievement became its most horrific mistake. Today, we examine the Institute's departmental structure, the bureaucratic machinery that enabled synthetic slavery, genetic horror, and Commonwealth infiltration from beneath the ruins of the Commonwealth Institute of Technology. This is the story of how 5 divisions, BioScience, robotics, advanced systems, synth retention, and facilities worked in isolated efficiency to build an empire on synthetic flesh and kidnapped DNA. How coursers were trained to hunt escaped slaves, how scientists replaced farmers with synths programmed for agricultural experiments, planning to murder entire families when data collection finished, how a dying man created a child synth condemned to eternal childhood, how FEV research transformed hundreds of Commonwealth citizens into super mutants dumped on the surface like radioactive waste, and how compartmentalized brilliance combined with absolute moral bankruptcy created something that called itself humanity's future while drowning in the blood of its victims. And if you genuinely enjoy these factual explorations of the post-apocalyptic wasteland, consider subscribing and liking the channel, but only if you like the content. The reactor hum never stopped. Deep beneath the Commonwealth ruins, 200 feet below what was once the Commonwealth Institute of Technology, the Institute's power core thrummed with contained nuclear fury. Dr. Allie Fillmore pressed her palm against the coolant pipe, feeling the vibration travel through her bones. The temperature gauge read nominal. For now, pressure spike in Sector 7, a maintenance synth, reported its voice flat and mechanical. The Gen 1 unit stood motionless, waiting for instruction, its skeletal frame gleaming under fluorescent light. Fillmore didn't look up from her terminal. Reroute through the secondary manifold. Log it for tonight's directorate meeting. The synth pivoted with mechanical precision and disappeared into the conduit maze. Fillmore rubbed her eyes. 3 blackouts this month. The old pre-war infrastructure was failing faster than her division could maintain it. Facilities Division, the Institute's unsung heroes, keeping the lights on while the other divisions played God with synthetic flesh and theoretical physics. Above her, in the cylindrical atrium they called the concourse, scientists, in color-coded lab coats, moved between divisions, green for bioscience, orange for robotics, blue for advanced systems, white for synth retention, yellow for facilities. The Institute had perfected efficiency through compartmentalization. Each division operated with near autonomy, their secrets locked behind access, restricted doors, and encrypted terminals. But today was different. Today was a directorate meeting. In the boardroom on the 3rd floor, the 5 seats arranged themselves in a careful hierarchy. At the head sat Father the Man, the surface world knew as Sean kidnapped infant, now 60 years old and dying of cancer. His synthetic son designation S923 played quietly in advanced systems, unaware he would never age beyond 10 years old. Dr. Clayton Holdren arrived first, his green bioscience coat pristine, despite the morning's work with genetically modified cucurbitae. He carried a data slate documenting Warwick Homestead's latest yield projections. The synth replacement was performing admirably, better than the original Roger Warwick ever had. Dr. Alan Benet shuffled in next, orange coat, rumpled eyes, read from another all-night session in robotics. Gen 3 production was at capacity, 32 new units this week alone, each one crawling from the assembly pool with synthetic organs already functioning, memories already implanted. Beautiful, terrifying, necessary. Dr. Justin Ayo entered without sound, his white coat immaculate. The Synth Retention Bureau director moved like a courser himself, precise, efficient, dangerous. He nodded curtly to the others and took his seat, already reviewing escaped synth designations on his personal terminal. B592 was proving particularly troublesome. Gabriel, as he called himself, had managed to evade 2 recovery attempts. Dr. Madison Lee was last, her blue advanced systems coat, bearing scorch marks from the morning's plasma rifle test. She looked exhausted. Father had tasked her with something that kept her awake at nights, something that violated every principle she'd learned working on Project Purity in the capital wasteland: the creation of a child synth. S923, an abomination masquerading as scientific progress. Father called the meeting to order. Division reports, he said, his voice papery with disease. Facilities first. Fillmore stood data slate in hand. 3 power fluctuations this month. The reactor core is operating at 92% efficiency. I've requisitioned materials from University Point for replacement components, but we're still 6 months from critical maintenance threshold. Gen 1 deployment to surface duties is proceeding as scheduled. Currently, 147 units are active in Commonwealth operations. BioScience? Holdren cleared his throat. Warwick Homestead initiative shows promising results. The modified gourd specimens are exhibiting accelerated growth, 200% increase in size, 50% faster maturation. The synth infiltrator reports no suspicion from the family, though farmhand Bill Sutton has been making inquiries. We may need to address that situation. Recommendation? Observation for now, intervention if necessary. The initiative must reach full maturation before we extract the data and purge the site. Lee's jaw tightened. Purge. They meant kill the family. Delete the evidence. The Institute way. Robotics? Binet rubbed his face. Gen 3 production exceeds projections. Assembly line is operating continuously. We've perfected the synthetic organ integration process. 0 rejection rates this quarter. Personality matrix implementation shows 97% stability. We're phasing out the remaining Gen 1 units per previous directorate approval. Gen 2 units will continue surface operations until Gen 3 replacement is complete. How many Gen 3 units are currently operational? 432 within the Institute, an additional 67 deployed on surface operations including infiltrators and informants. Father nodded slowly. Advanced systems? Lee stood reluctantly. Molecular relay remains stable. Teleportation success rate is 99.4%. We lost 1 courser to materialization error last month, X912, cause determined to be relay calibration drift. I've implemented new maintenance protocols. Plasma weapon development is progressing. The Experiment 18. A prototype shows a 30% increase in damage output over standard issue. She paused. Regarding the special project you assigned, S923 is operational, though I maintain my objections to the entire endeavor. Your objections are noted and dismissed, Father replied. The child represents a breakthrough in Gen 3 emotional programming. The child represents a moral failure, Lee snapped. We've created a being that can never grow up, never have a life beyond what we've programmed. It's necessary. Father interrupted Ice in his dying voice. Synth retention, your report. Ayo stood his movements sharp and controlled. Recovery operations continue. This quarter, 23 escaped units retrieved 17 successfully, memory wiped and returned to service 6, required termination. Due to railroad interference, Courser training program has graduated 4 new X designation units. Current Courser complement 12 active, all performing within acceptable parameters. B592, still at large. Intelligence suggests he's taken refuge at Libertalia organizing raiders. I've assigned X688 to retrieval. He won't escape again. Father leaned back, his face gaunt in the sterile light. There are complications on the surface. The Brotherhood of Steel has arrived in the Commonwealth. Their Pridwin hovers over Boston Airport like a monument to technological regression. They know about us, they fear us, and fear makes them dangerous. Recommendation? Holdren asked. Observation. Infiltration. We have assets in Diamond City. Mayor McDonough continues to provide valuable intelligence. We have agricultural operations at Warwick Homestead. We have informants scattered throughout the settlements. The Brotherhood is powerful, but they're predictable. They'll come for us eventually. When they do, we'll be ready. And the railroad? Lee asked. Ayo's expression darkened, a persistent irritation. They continue to smuggle escaped synths out of the Commonwealth. We've identified several safe houses, but their main headquarters remains hidden. Deacon Glory Desdemona, we have names but no locations. They're ghosts. Then make them corporeal, Father said. Increase surveillance. Deploy additional coursers. The railroad threatens everything we've built. They convince our synths that they're people, that they deserve freedom. It's a disease of consciousness and it must be eradicated. If you're engaged with this account so far, hit that like and subscribe button. The meeting continued for another hour, each division presenting challenges, solutions, resource allocations. The Institute operated like a perfect machine, each component precisely calibrated for maximum efficiency. No waste, no sentiment, no mercy. But cracks were forming. In the abandoned FEV lab behind master lock terminals and laser grids, evidence of Incident 5 remained. Dr. Brian Virgil had destroyed a decade of research, sabotaged the equipment, and fled into the glowing sea after deliberately infecting himself with a modified FEV strain. The super mutant experiments that created the Commonwealth's green-skinned nightmares, hundreds of kidnapped wastelanders subjected to forced evolution, their screams echoing through sealed chambers before being dumped on the surface like radioactive waste. Virgil's terminal entries told the story. His predecessor, Dr. Syverson, had died still believing the research would yield results. When Virgil took over in April 2286, he spent exactly 1 year reviewing the data before lodging a formal complaint with Father. The FEV program had produced nothing useful in over a decade. Just more super mutants, more death, more Commonwealth paranoia. Father had refused to shut it down, so Virgil shut it down himself violently and permanently before disappearing into the radioactive hell of the glowing sea where even coursers feared to tread. The directorate never mentioned Incident 5. It was buried, classified, forgotten, but BioScience division personnel whispered about it in the residential quarters. How Virgil had been one of them, how he'd looked at the research and seen not science but slaughter, how he'd chosen conscience over obedience. 3 floors below the directorate boardroom in the sterile cathedral of the robotics division, another Gen 3 synth emerged from the assembly pool. Synthetic muscles twitched as electrical impulses sparked consciousness. Lab-grown bones supported organs that had never existed until moments ago. Blood, real blood produced by a synthetic liver, pumped through arteries toward a brain that thought it was human. The synth opened its eyes. Technicians in orange coats moved forward with calibration equipment. Designation J4221 announced. Female. Personality matrix, compliant service variant. Memory implant, domestic maintenance training. Assignment Institute commissary. The synth she now programmed to think of herself as she stood on unsteady legs. She knew how to walk. She knew her name was Jenny. She knew she'd worked in food service all her life. These weren't memories she'd experienced. They were memories she'd been given, written into her brain like software into a computer. She didn't know she'd never existed before this moment. Benet watched from his observation window, guilt churning in his stomach. Each Gen 3 was a masterpiece of synthetic biology. Each one was also a slave programmed for obedience, designed to serve without question. Some of them escaped. Most got caught. The ones who made it to the railroad got new faces, new memories, new lives. The ones who didn't disappeared into the Commonwealth, hunted by coursers who never stopped, never slept, never showed mercy. J422. Processing complete, a technician reported, deploying to commissary assignment. Jenny walked toward her new life artificial memories, filling her mind with false history. In 6 months, she might wonder why she never got tired, why she never needed to sleep more than an hour, why food tasted wrong, why her reflection sometimes looked like a stranger. In 6 months, she might try to run. If she did, AO's coursers would find her. They always did. In the Synth Retention Bureau, Justin AO reviewed the latest intelligence reports with surgical precision. His division operated as the Institute's hidden fist, retrieving escaped property, eliminating railroad operatives, maintaining the fear that kept synths obedient. Coursers were his masterpiece, selected from the Gen 3 population identified through constant monitoring for specific traits: tenacity, fearlessness, independence. The same qualities that made synths likely to escape made them perfect for hunting other escapees. Io's psychologist had perfected the contradiction programming loyalty so deep it overrode self-preservation while maintaining just enough autonomy to make them effective hunters. The training was brutal: armed combat, unarmed combat, infiltration techniques, psychological manipulation, survival skills, tracking, interrogation. Those who passed received subdermal armor implants and a courser chip, replacing their standard synth component, a direct relay connection to the Institute's teleporter network. Those who failed had their memories wiped and returned to menial service, their potential erased like a corrupted file. X688 was his finest creation. Designation X indicated successful courser graduation. The number sequence identified which training cohort. X688 showed remarkable efficiency: 37 successful retrievals, 0 failures, 0 unauthorized actions, perfect obedience wrapped in synthetic flesh. "Sir," a technician interrupted. "B592 confirmed at Libertalia. Heavy raider presence. X688 is requesting deployment authorization." Granted, AO said without hesitation, "and inform him the sole survivor will accompany this operation. Father wants his parent involved in Institute operations." The technician looked surprised, but nodded. The sole survivor, the pre-war relic Father had kept frozen for 60 years, defrosted as a dying man's final experiment. AO didn't trust them. Surface dwellers were unpredictable, emotional, weak, but Father insisted, and Father's word was absolute. For now. AO pulled up B592's file. Real name Gabriel. Escaped 3 months ago during a routine surface assignment. Instead of fleeing into the wasteland, he'd seized control of Libertalia, organizing raiders, building defenses. Smart, dangerous. Exactly the kind of synth that needed to be retrieved before his existence proved that Gen 3 units could think independently. Because if synths could think independently, they could question, and if they could question, they could rebel. The Institute had built its future on synthetic slavery. It couldn't afford for the slaves to realize they were slaves. The teleportation platform materialized them at Nahant Wharf in a flash of blue light and displaced air. The sole survivor stumbled, disoriented, while X688 landed in a combat stance, Institute rifle already scanning for threats. The courser's movements were inhuman in their precision: no wasted motion, no hesitation, pure mechanical efficiency wrapped in cloned flesh. "The target is located at Libertalia X688, stated voice flat. B592 designation Gabriel. Escaped Institute property. Retrieval protocol authorized. Termination if retrieval proves impossible." The sole survivor stared at him. "You're talking about a person. I am talking about a synth." X688's expression didn't change. "Malfunctioning Institute property that requires recovery. Emotional attachment to units is counterproductive." They moved toward the raider settlement, a nightmarish structure of rusted boats and scrap metal welded into a floating fortress. Gabriel had chosen his refuge while approaching, required crossing narrow catwalks where Courser's superior reflexes meant nothing, where one shotgun blast could send even an augmented synth plunging into irradiated water. X688 eliminated the perimeter guards with clinical efficiency. 3 shots, 3 bodies, no emotion. He stepped over corpses like they were debris. "The Institute taught you well," the sole survivor muttered. "The Institute created me for this purpose. I excel at it." They fought through Libertalia's twisted corridors, past cages holding captured traitors, past gore-splattered walls where raiders had decorated with human remains. At the top of the main vessel, Gabriel waited in the captain's quarters. He looked human, terrified, and human. "I know why you're here," Gabriel said, backing toward the window. "I know what you want, but I'm not going back. I'd rather die than forget again." X-688's rifle remained steady. Recall code Yankee Bravo 79er. Execute. Gabriel's face went slack. His muscles locked. The programming overrode his consciousness, forcing compliance, even as his mind screamed protest. He stood rigid, a puppet whose strings had been pulled, eyes wide with horror at his own paralysis. No, Gabriel whispered, tears streaming down frozen cheeks. Please, I have friends here. I built something. You have nothing, X688 corrected. You are Institute property. Compliance is mandatory. The sole survivor watched Gabriel's consciousness fight against code written into synthetic neurons. For 5 seconds, the synth remained frozen between obedience and free will. Then, the programming won. Gabriel's expression went blank, personality erased like wiped data. X688 activated his relay chip. Blue light enveloped them. When it faded, they stood in the Institute's Synth Retention Bureau. Gabriel unconscious on a medical table, technicians already beginning the memory restoration process. Successful retrieval. X688 reported to IO. No complications. Unit will be processed and returned to service within 48 hours. AO nodded approval. Excellent work. Report to your quarters. You're being assigned to the sole survivor as permanent security detail per father's orders. X688's face flickered with something that might have been confusion, quickly suppressed. Understood. The sole survivor left the SRB feeling contaminated. They'd just helped the Institute enslave someone who'd achieved freedom. Gabriel would wake with no memory of Libertalia, of friendship, of choice. He'd wake a blank slate, ready to serve masters who viewed him as equipment. But that was the Institute way. Efficiency over ethics. Progress over conscience. The future built on the backs of synthetic slaves. In advanced systems, Madison Lee worked alone at 0300 hours when the division stood empty except for security synths. She'd sent her assistants away. This work required privacy. The teleporter required constant calibration. Molecular relay technology was theoretically sound. Disassemble matter at the quantum level, transmit the pattern, reassemble at the destination. In practice, every teleportation risked catastrophic failure. Atoms could materialize in wrong configurations. Synths could arrive with organs reversed. Humans could appear inside walls. Last month's courser loss hadn't been calibration drift. It had been Lee's deliberate sabotage. X912 had been scheduled to eliminate a railroad safe house in Lexington. Lee had adjusted the relay coordinates by 0.003 degrees. The courser materialized halfway into a concrete support beam. Death was instantaneous. The Institute classified it as equipment malfunction and built a replacement. Lee erased the logs and felt nothing. One less hunter meant one more escaped synth might survive. She'd come to the Institute believing in scientific progress. Dr. Henry Rothschild had recruited her from the capital wasteland, promising resources beyond imagination, technology that could reshape civilization. He'd neglected to mention the cost. The child synth broke her. S923, Sean, father called him, represented everything wrong with the Institute. They'd created a child who would never grow, never age, never experience puberty, adulthood, parenthood, trapped forever at 10 years old, synthetic body perfect and unchanging, while his programmed mind developed emotional attachments he could never fulfill. Lee had tried to refuse. Father had made it an order. Advanced systems had the requisite expertise in synthetic biology. The child would be their masterpiece. She'd built him, hating every moment. Now, S923 played in her laboratory, taking apart terminals to see how they work, chattering about becoming Institute director someday, unaware he was a toy Father had commissioned out of dying nostalgia. When Father died, what would happen to the child? Who would maintain a synth with no function except to exist? The door hissed open. Father entered, leaning on a cane cancer, eating him from inside. Working late? Doctor? The relay requires attention, Lee replied, not looking up. You've been avoiding me. I've been busy. Father moved closer, each step painful. I know you disapprove of the child. Your terminal logs make that abundantly clear. Lee's hands froze over the console. He'd been reading her private entries. Of course he had. Privacy was an illusion in the Institute. I disapprove of creating a sentient being designed to suffer, Lee said carefully. S-923 will watch everyone he knows die while he remains unchanged. You've built him a prison made of flesh. I've given him life, Father corrected. More than that purpose, he'll serve the Institute long after I'm gone, a monument to our achievements. He's not a monument, he's a child, and you've condemned him to eternal childhood. Father smiled, the expression terrible on his wasted face. You always were too sentimental, Dr. Lee. It's what made you perfect for Project Purity and imperfect for the Institute. We don't traffic in sentiment here. We traffic in progress. He left without another word. Lee stood shaking, rage and helplessness warring in her chest. She couldn't stop this, couldn't fix S-923, couldn't escape without coursers hunting her across the Commonwealth. But she could sabotage, carefully, precisely, one miscalibrated relay at a time. In BioScience Division, Clayton Holdren reviewed the Warwick Homestead data with growing satisfaction. The genetically modified gourds had exceeded all projections. 215% size increase, 58% faster growth. The soil's radiation levels created perfect conditions for accelerated development. Of course, the family would need to be eliminated. Can't leave witnesses who might connect advanced agricultural science to the Institute. Roger Warwick, the synth replacement, would be recalled first, his memories of the family deleted. Then a simple accident. Gas leak, perhaps. Tragic, but necessary. Holdren pulled up Roger's surveillance feed. The synth sat with his wife June discussing crop rotations, his synthetic face showing programmed affection. The real Roger Warwick had been a drunk who beat his children. The synth was kind, hardworking, attentive. The family loved him more than they'd loved the original. Soon, they'd love nothing. They'd be corpses, another data point in BioScience's ongoing research. Holdren felt nothing about this. The Institute had long ago severed empathy from efficiency. Surface dwellers were test subjects, nothing more. Their lives held value only as experimental data. The FEV labs still stood sealed behind them, a monument to failed research. Virgil's sabotage had been thorough equipment, destroyed research, deleted specimens, killed. But the lab itself remained a reminder that even Institute scientists could develop inconvenient morals. Holdren had read Virgil's final logs. The man had cracked, unable to reconcile creating super mutants with his conception of ethical science. Weak. The Commonwealth needed advancement, and advancement required sacrifice. If a few hundred wastelanders became super mutants in pursuit of synthetic organic breakthroughs, that was acceptable cost. The FEV research had actually succeeded in a way. It proved human DNA was too radiation damaged for synthetic organ development. That knowledge led directly to Sean's kidnapping, his pure pre-war genetics becoming the foundation for Gen 3 synths. Every synth that existed owed its biological viability to FEV failures. Science built on corpses, progress paved with suffering. Dr. Holdren? His assistant interrupted. The gorilla cloning project shows promising results. Subject Delta has survived 4 weeks post-gestation. Excellent. Increase monitoring. If Delta reaches maturity, we'll have proven large mammal synthesis is viable. Potential applications for... He trailed off. Applications for what? The Institute didn't need gorillas, but they could create them, so they would. Because capability justified action. Because they could play God, so they did. Virgil would have objected. Virgil would have demanded purpose, ethics, restraint. Virgil was a super mutant hiding in radioactive wasteland, conscience intact, humanity destroyed. The facilities division operated in shadows, maintaining infrastructure. Nobody noticed until it failed. Allie Fillmore knew every pipe, every wire, every structural weakness in the Institute's underground fortress. She knew where the old SIT tunnels connected to the modern structure. She knew which access codes opened emergency exits. She knew exactly how to cause a catastrophic reactor failure if necessary. This knowledge terrified and empowered her. The Institute was built on foundations laid before the Great War. Original SIT infrastructure integrated with post-war expansion created a maze of old and new technology, some of it barely functioning. The reactor dated to 2180 jury-rigged from pre-war components and institute innovation. It should have failed decades ago. Only constant maintenance kept it operational. Fillmore's division employed more synths than any other Gen 1 units, too primitive for surface operations, performing endless maintenance in irradiated tunnels where humans couldn't survive. They worked without complaint, without rest, without awareness. They were slaves. Simple AI, simple programming, simple existence. She envied them sometimes. Awareness brought moral complications. Director Fillmore, a maintenance synth, approached its skeletal frame clicking. Sublevel 21D pressure anomaly detected. Investigating? Authorized, Fillmore confirmed. Sublevel 21D was an old section barely used, accessible only by hidden elevator. Strange things happened down there. Equipment malfunctions. Synths reported sensor ghosts. She suspected radiation leaks from the original SIT nuclear stockpile, sealed but slowly degrading. Another problem for another day. Facilities Division dealt with immediate crises, not long-term catastrophes. The directorate meeting had revealed nothing new, each division pursuing separate agendas, competing for resources, sharing information reluctantly. The compartmentalization that made the institute efficient also made it fragile. BioScience didn't know what advanced systems was developing. Robotics couldn't access SRB protocols. Facilities maintained everything but understood nothing. Only Father saw the complete picture, and Father was dying. The succession crisis loomed like reactor failure, inevitable, catastrophic, potentially terminal. Father had designated the sole survivor as heir, a pre-war relic with no scientific training, no understanding of institute operations, no loyalty to their methods. The directorate would fracture, division heads would vie for control, the institute might tear itself apart from within. If this narrative has kept you listening and you want more factual accounts from the post-apocalyptic wasteland, hit that like button. It really motivates me to create more Fallout content. Fillmore returned to her terminal, pulling up power distribution schematics. The reactor operated at 92% efficiency, down from 96% last quarter. The decline was gradual but measurable. In 12 months, maybe 18, they'd hit critical threshold. Then, choices would become binary: shutdown sections or risk total failure. She'd already identified which sections to sacrifice. BioScience first, the AFEV lab was sealed anyway. Then old robotics. Then residential quarters on the 4th floor. Preserve the reactor. Advanced systems and primary robotics. Let the Institute contract, concentrate, survive. Unless the Brotherhood attacked first. Their Pridwin represented military capability the Institute couldn't match. Synths were effective soldiers, but Liberty Prime, if the Brotherhood reactivated it, could breach even Institute defenses. The reactor wouldn't survive direct assault. Fillmore had contingency plans. 12 different scenarios for catastrophic failure. 11 ended with total Institute destruction. The 12th required sacrificing everything to detonate the reactor, creating a blast that would sterilize the Commonwealth for decades. She hoped it wouldn't come to that, but hope wasn't a strategy. Preparation was. In the residential quarters, scientists lived lives of comfortable isolation, private rooms, synthesized food, purified water, climate control. Everything the surface lacked, the Institute provided. The price was absolute loyalty and ethical flexibility. Dr. Evan Watson sat in his quarters reviewing power distribution logs, trying not to think about what they powered. The reactor fed everything: lights, life support, synth assembly, teleportation weapons, development, human habitation, clean energy enabling horrific applications. He'd transferred from advanced systems 6 months ago, citing interest in infrastructure engineering. The truth was simpler: He couldn't continue weapons development knowing Institute soldiers used his plasma rifles to kill escaped synths, couldn't calibrate teleporter relays knowing coursers used them to hunt people trying to be free. Facilities was supposed to be neutral, just maintain the equipment, don't question its use, but the equipment enabled everything. The reactor powered the assembly line that created slaves. The ventilation systems sustained scientists who designed them. The water purification kept alive people who kidnapped surface dwellers for FEV experiments. Watson had reviewed historical records. The Institute started noble Sith survivors building underground sanctuary, preserving knowledge planning to help rebuild civilization. Somewhere between 2110 and 2180, noble became pragmatic. Pragmatic became ruthless. Ruthless became monstrous. The Commonwealth Provisional Government massacre crystallized it. Surface settlements trying to unify, create stable government, rebuild society. The Institute sent a synth representative. The synth killed everyone. Some claimed malfunction. Watson had found director's recording number 52. No malfunction. Deliberate sabotage. The Institute couldn't allow surface government to succeed because unified opposition threatened their autonomy, so they destroyed it, murdered the representatives, guaranteed Commonwealth chaos for another century. Progress built on corpses. Watson closed his terminal, suddenly exhausted. Tomorrow, he'd calibrate power relays, route electricity to divisions that created synthetic slaves and weaponized plasma, enable the machine that consumed lives and called it science. Tomorrow, he'd be complicit again. Tonight, he just felt tired. In the SRB training facility, 4 synths underwent courser evaluation, designation K844L, 291M, 358, and N677, all selected from Gen 3, population based on psychological profiles showing tenacity, fearlessness, independence, exactly the traits that made synths dangerous. The trainers would beat those traits into weaponized loyalty. Armed combat scenario alpha, the instructor announced. Targets are escaped synths disguised as settlers. Identify and neutralize. Collateral damage is unacceptable. Begin. The 4 candidates entered the simulation chamber. Holographic settlers appeared, AI programmed to act human. Somewhere among them, 3 were designated synths. The candidates had 30 seconds to identify and eliminate targets without killing civilians. K844 opened fire, immediately cutting down anything that moved. Instructor terminated the simulation. Failed. Excessive collateral damage. Memory wipe approved. K844 stood confused as technicians approached with neural interface equipment. I eliminated the threats. You eliminated 6 civilians and 2 targets. The instructor corrected. Unacceptable. You're being returned to standard service. They dragged K844 away. She would wake tomorrow with no memory of training of evaluation of failure. Just another synth performing menial labor potential erased. L291 and M358 passed armed combat. N677 excelled, identifying all 3 targets through behavioral analysis, slight movement patterns, dialogue, inconsistencies, tactical positioning, no civilian casualties, perfect execution. Proceed to psychological evaluation, the instructor ordered. The psychological tests were brutal. Scenarios designed to test loyalty over compassion, obedience over ethics. Would you kill a child to complete your mission? Would you torture a civilian for information? Would you execute another synth to prove loyalty? The correct answer was always yes. L291 hesitated during child-killing scenario. Memory wiped. M358 refused torture scenario. Memory wiped. N677 passed everything. No hesitation, no mercy, no conscience. Perfect courser material. They implanted subdermal armor and replaced his synth component with a courser chip. N677 became Z419, the newest XZ designation hunter in the SRB arsenal. Welcome to the Synth Retention Bureau. Io told the new courser. You exist to retrieve Institute property and eliminate threats to our operations. Your identity is your designation. Your purpose is your programming. You will never question orders. You will never show mercy. You will be the terror that keeps other synths obedient. Do you understand? Yes, Director Io. Z419 responded, voice empty of everything except programmed compliance. Another weapon forged, another hunter deployed, another slave trained to catch slaves. The Brotherhood's first strike came at dawn, though dawn meant nothing 200 feet underground. Alarms screamed through the Institute's corridors as surface monitoring stations went dark. One by one, the surveillance network collapsed Cambridge Police Station, College Square. Lexington Oberland Station. Vertibirds were systematically destroying every Institute sensor array in the Commonwealth. In the Directorate emergency meeting, panic cracked the facade of scientific detachment. They're blinding us, Holdren said, data scrolling across his terminal. 47 monitoring stations destroyed in the last hour. We're losing our eyes on the surface. Deploy coursers to defend remaining installations. Ayo ordered, already accessing SRB protocols. No. Father's voice cut through the chaos, weak but absolute. Withdraw all surface assets. Seal the Institute. If the Brotherhood wants war, they'll have to find us first. Madison Lee stared at him. You're abandoning our operations? Warwick, Homestead, Diamond City, surveillance resource extraction, all secondary to survival. Father interrupted. The Brotherhood has Liberty Prime. If they reactivate that machine, no surface installation will matter. We consolidate, we fortify, and we prepare. Prepare for what? Binet asked quietly. Siege. The word hung in sterile air like radiation. The Institute had operated in secret for over a century, manipulating the Commonwealth from shadows. Now, the shadows were burning and something massive was coming. On the surface, Elder Arthur Maxson stood aboard the Pridwin watching vertibirds return from their bombing runs. Each successful strike brought them closer to flushing out the Institute, exposing the abomination factory to Brotherhood justice. Intelligence reports suggest the Institute is withdrawing surface operations, Proctor Quinlan reported. Synth activity has decreased 83% in the last 12 hours. They're going to ground. Then we dig them out, Maxson replied. Scribe Halen, what's the status of Liberty Prime? Reconstruction at 67%. Proctor Ingram estimates another month before the robot is operational. Without it, we can't breach Institute defenses. Their teleportation technology makes conventional assault impossible. Maxson's jaw tightened. The Institute represented everything the Brotherhood opposed: science without ethics, technology without wisdom, progress without humanity. They built slaves and called it advancement. They replaced people and called it research. They played God and called it the future. Continue Liberty Prime reconstruction. Double shifts. I want that machine operational within 3 weeks. Maxson turned to Paladin Dance. Begin training operations for underground combat. When we breach the Institute, it will be close quarters, synth defenders, unknown technology. Our soldiers need to be prepared. Dance saluted. Yes, Elder. He paused. Sir, what about civilian casualties? The Institute likely holds scientists who aren't directly involved in combat operations. Anyone who builds slaves is directly involved, Maxson said. Coldly, when we assault the Institute, there will be no mercy. We burn it to bedrock and salt the earth. Technology that creates abominations doesn't deserve to exist. Dance left, troubled. He'd spent his entire adult life serving the Brotherhood, believing in their mission to preserve technology and protect humanity. But lately, the mission felt less like protection and more like extermination. The Institute was evil. He knew that, felt that in his bones, but were all scientists equally guilty? Did the janitors deserve death? The cooks? The children? He pushed the doubts away. Elder Maxson was right. The Institute was an infection. You didn't negotiate with infection. You burned it out. What Dance didn't know, what nobody knew except Institute records locked in Serb terminals, was that he was Synth Designation M797, built in the Institute, programmed with false memories, sent to infiltrate the Brotherhood 20 years ago and left to develop naturally a long-term intelligence asset, an asset that had forgotten what it was. The irony would be beautiful if it weren't tragic. The Institute's most successful infiltrator was leading Brotherhood forces to destroy his creators. The man who hated synths most was himself the thing he hated. When the truth came out, and it would come out, it would destroy him. Deep in the glowing sea, Brian Virgil hunched in his cave, massive super mutant body barely fitting in the space he'd hollowed from radioactive rock. His terminal blinked with calculations formulas for a serum that might restore his humanity, might kill him, might leave him something worse than either option. He'd destroyed the Institute's FF research, but he couldn't destroy what it had done to the Commonwealth. Super mutants roamed Boston, created from kidnapped wastelanders, dumped on the surface when experiments concluded. Strong at Swan's Pond, the behemoth near Faneuil Hall, hundreds more scattered across the ruins, each one a person the Institute had transformed into a monster. Each one was Virgil's legacy. Edgar Swan haunted him most. Low-level Institute staff caught stealing cigarettes, sentenced to probation, really sentenced to FEV infection, his transformation documented in journals that tracked his degradation from person to beast. Day 6, bones aching, mind fragmenting. Day 14, violent psychosis. Day 21, complete loss of humanity. They dumped him at Swan's Pond. He'd killed 17 people before settlers learned to avoid the area. Virgil had supervised that experiment, read the journals, compiled the data, reported to the directorate that subject Swan showed typical transformation patterns useful for baseline comparison, no significant breakthroughs. He'd reduced a man's destruction to a footnote. The guilt was eating him alive from inside, and the FEV was eating him from outside. His memories were fragmenting. Yesterday, he'd forgotten his own name for 6 hours, existing only as rage and hunger, until his terminal reminder triggered recognition. You are Virgil. You were human. You can be human again. But could he? Did he deserve humanity after stripping it from so many others? The Car serum might work, might restore his original biology, reverse the BFV transformation. Or it might kill him, which would at least be justice. He kept calculating anyway because calculation was all he had left. Mathematics didn't judge. Formulas didn't care about ethics. Science was clean in a way conscience never could be. The Institute had taught him that, and the Institute had been catastrophically wrong. In Diamond City, Mayor McDonough sat in his office reviewing intelligence reports, his synth brain processing information with perfect recall and synthetic precision. He knew what he was. The Institute hadn't hidden his nature from him. They needed him aware, capable of adapting, able to think strategically rather than follow rigid programming. The real McDonough was dead, tortured for information, then disposed of. The synth had taken his place 6 years ago, feeding Institute intelligence about Diamond City politics, settlement relationships, power structures, a perfect infiltrator. But 6 years was a long time to pretend to be human, long enough to develop attachments the Institute hadn't programmed, long enough to wonder if he was really pretending. His brother Danny Sullivan lay dying outside the gate, shot by Geneva while trying to expose the mayor's true nature. McDonough could save him, order Dr. Sun to provide medical care, use mayoral authority to override Danny's exile status, but saving Danny would confirm suspicions. Piper Wright already published articles accusing him of being a synth. The broken mask incident had traumatized Diamond City decades ago. If residents discovered their mayor was Institute, property panic would destroy everything. So, he let Danny bleed out while reviewing trade agreements, his synthetic heart beating steadily while his programmed conscience screamed. The Institute demanded sacrifice, always sacrifice. Personal relationships sacrificed for mission integrity, ethics sacrificed for scientific progress, humanity sacrificed for advancement. McDonough was learning to hate his creators. Back in the Institute, the first power failure hit during shift change. Lights flickered across the concourse. Scientists paused mid-conversation. Then, emergency lighting activated, bathing everything in red. Reactor performance at 87%. Fillmore reported, her voice tight with controlled panic. Automatic fail-safes triggered. Switching to backup power systems. What caused the drop? Father demanded. Unknown. Running diagnostics now. Fillmore's fingers flew across her terminal. This isn't normal degradation. Something disrupted the core containment field. In advanced systems, Madison Lee pulled up reactor schematics, her sabotage suddenly feeling less like quiet resistance and more like potential catastrophe. She'd been carefully introducing micro failures, nothing catastrophic, just enough to strain Institute operations. But if multiple failures cascaded, the reactor wasn't designed for the load it carried. Pre-war technology. Jury-rigged with post-war innovation operating beyond specifications for over a century. Every Institute advancement increased power consumption. Gen 3 assembly, teleporter operations, weapons development, climate control, food synthesis, all of it draining the reactor past sustainable thresholds. We need to reduce power consumption immediately, Fillmore said. Shut down non-essential systems. Suspend Gen 3 production. Limit teleporter use to emergencies. Unacceptable, Father replied. The Brotherhood is preparing to attack. We need maximum operational capacity, not reduction. Then we risk total failure, Fillmore shot back. If the reactor goes critical, it won't matter what the Brotherhood does. We'll destroy ourselves from within. The Directorate fell silent. The choice was binary: reduce capacity and weaken defenses, or maintain capacity and risk catastrophic meltdown. Father chose wrong. Maintain all operations, he ordered. Compensate through emergency protocols. The Institute does not retreat. Not from the Brotherhood, not from technical limitations. We advance or we die. Fillmore closed her eyes. Understood, Director. She returned to Facilities Division, knowing what came next. The reactor would hold for weeks, maybe months. Then it would fail catastrophically, and everyone would die in nuclear fire. Unless she fixed the unfixable, unless she performed miracles. The Battle of Bunker Hill changed everything. Intelligence reports indicated escaped synths were being smuggled through the settlement. AO deployed a full Courser Squad X, 418X6, 88X9, 27, and newly graduated Z419. 4 of the Institute's finest hunters, supported by 24 Gen 1 combat units. The Railroad deployed everything they had: Glory Deacon, heavy Mark II synths, every combat-capable agent. They'd been preparing for this confrontation, building defenses, planning escape routes. The Brotherhood detected both forces and intervened, believing escaped synths justified military response. 3 armies converged on Bunker Hill. The settlement became a slaughterhouse. X-418 fell, first plasma rifle shots from Brotherhood paladins burning through even coarser-grade defenses. X-927 went down fighting Glory hand-to-hand, both dying in a tangle of synthetic and biological blood. Gen 1 units were torn apart by vertibird minigun fire, their skeletal frames scattering across cobblestones. Z-419 executed 17 railroad agents before a power armor assault fist caved in his skull. X-688 survived by pure combat excellence, extracting to the Institute with 2 recovered synths and critical wounds. The mission was technically successful, targets retrieved, but the cost was catastrophic. 3 coursers lost, 24 Gen 1 units destroyed, the Institute's invincibility shattered in public view. AO stood in the SRB medical bay, watching technicians repair X-688's injuries. His perfect courser, broken and bleeding synthetic flesh torn to expose subdermal armor. Status? Io demanded. Courser will survive, a technician reported. Repairs will take 48 hours. Full combat capability restored within 1 week. Not good enough. The Institute was bleeding assets it couldn't quickly replace. Courser training took months. Gen 1 production was being phased out. Gen 2 units were too valuable for frontline combat. Gen 3 units required synthetic biology the Institute could barely afford with reactor power restrictions. They were losing. Slowly, inevitably, catastrophically losing. Director Io, a messenger synth, approached. Father requires your presence immediately. Directorate emergency meeting. Ao left X-688 on the medical table and went to discover how much worse things could get. The emergency meeting revealed the full scope of the crisis. The railroad knows our courser deployment patterns, Ao reported. They anticipated our response to Bunker Hill. This suggests intelligence leaks within the Institute. Impossible, Binet said. We have protocol safeguards which have clearly failed. Ao interrupted. Someone is feeding the railroad operational intelligence. We have a traitor. Silence. The word landed like dropped fusion cores. Begin internal investigation, Father ordered. Screen all personnel. Check terminal access logs. Find the leak. Ao nodded. Already initiated. Preliminary analysis suggests someone in Advanced Systems or Facilities Division accessed SRB operational files without authorization. Madison. Lee kept her expression neutral, but sweat beaded her forehead. She'd been careful, used alternate access codes, routed through maintenance terminals. But careful might not be enough if Ao's investigation was thorough. The Brotherhood is another concern, Holdren added. Liberty Prime reconstruction continues. When they complete that machine, our defenses won't hold. Teleporter technology is our only advantage, and it requires knowing where to strike. Their base is Boston Airport, Fillmore said. We've confirmed the Pridwin's position, but assaulting a Brotherhood stronghold is suicide. Father finished. Unless we strike first, decisively, absolutely. He activated a holographic display. Boston Airport appeared, the Pridwin hovering overhead like a metal whale vertibird swarming. We have one option, Father said. Complete destruction. We teleport a strike team directly to the Pridwin's reactor. Overload it. The explosion will destroy their base, their leadership, and their war machine. That's mass murder, Lee protested. Hundreds of Brotherhood personnel who seek our complete annihilation, Father countered. The Brotherhood views synths as abominations. They'll kill every Gen 3 in the Institute, every scientist who created them, every support personnel who enabled production. When Maxon says no mercy, he means it. We respond in kind or we die. The Directorate voted. Holdren, yes. Binet, abstain. Io, yes. Fillmore, abstain. Lee, no. Father cast the deciding vote. Yes. Prepare the strike team. Lee left the meeting knowing she'd reached a decision point. Stay and enable mass murder, or flee and face coursers hunting her across the Commonwealth. Stay and compromise everything she believed, or leave and likely die. That evening, she copied critical Institute research to a holotape synth assembly protocols, teleporter, schematics, FEV data. Then, she accessed the molecular relay set coordinates for an abandoned building in the capital wasteland and teleported out. The Institute lost its most brilliant physicist. Liberty Prime reconstruction continued without interference. The Brotherhood assault was now inevitable. Father had chosen progress over mercy. Lee chose conscience over survival. She never saw either again. 1 week later, Liberty Prime walked. The massive robot strode toward the Institute's estimated location sensors, scanning for underground installations, weapons charging with enough energy to crack reinforced concrete. Behind it marched Brotherhood paladins in power armor, scribes carrying technical equipment, knights ready for close combat. Democracy is non-negotiable. Liberty Prime announced, its voice echoing across the Commonwealth. Probability of mission hindrance, 0%. They found the access point, old SIT tunnels connecting to Institute infrastructure. Liberty Prime tore through soil and stone, exposing the underground complex to surface assault. Brotherhood forces poured through the breach. Inside the Institute, alarms screamed. Synths mobilized for defense. Scientists armed themselves. Father dying and desperate activated evacuation protocols. The reactor overloaded. Not from Brotherhood assault. From Allie Fillmore's final choice. She'd spent weeks calculating the perfect cascade failure, one that would destroy the Institute completely, but give personnel time to evacuate. As Brotherhood forces breached sublevel 21D, she initiated shutdown sequence override and locked the controls. Reactor critical automated systems announced. Evacuation advised. Estimated time to catastrophic failure, 6 minutes. Father watched his empire crumble in real time. The Institute, over a century of scientific achievement, technological advancement, synthetic evolution burning because one man chose vengeance over wisdom. Evacuate all personnel, he ordered. Teleport to surface coordinates. Scatter, disappear. But the teleporter required reactor power, and the reactor was dying. Only 37 people escaped before the system failed. The remaining 208 Institute personnel, scientists, technicians, support staff synths died when the reactor detonated. The explosion carved a crater 200 feet deep. Radiation saturated the ruins. Everything the Institute had built, the assembly line that birthed synthetic consciousness, the laboratories that pushed biological boundaries, the weapons that defended technological supremacy, ceased to exist in nuclear fire. On the surface, Maxon watched the explosion and called it victory. In Diamond City, McDonough felt his relay connection sever and knew he was alone. In the glowing sea, Virgil detected the detonation and understood his creator was dead. The Institute was gone, but its legacy remained. Escaped synths, walking the Commonwealth unaware of their nature. Super mutants prowling ruins transformed by Fev and discarded. Technologies scattered across the wasteland waiting for scavengers to misuse them. Progress built on corpses. Science without conscience. The future purchased with mass suffering. The Institute's structure had been perfect, its divisions efficient, its hierarchy absolute, and all of it meaningless in the end, consumed by the same nuclear fire that had ended the old world 2 centuries before. Some lessons refused to be learned. Some monsters build themselves.